now we can see it.
Fantastic. So thanks for that, Adarsha. Fantastic framing of some of the attack vectors and the rather mature ecosystem that is outside on the dark market. As Adarsha mentioned, Derek Kerr, I work in the Microsoft Technology Centers here in Ottawa. I focus specifically on security, intelligence, policing, and government all up. So cybersecurity is top of mind and a regular conversation from a day-to-day perspective. So we're going to try to frame the challenge, how we're looking to address the challenge with AI and ML, and inevitably some ways that Microsoft is looking to help you and support you in the cybersecurity ecosystem challenges that are presented or will be inherent themes as we go through the presentations today. So with the change in the ecosystem, and especially with COVID, I don't know how the city of Brampton and the greater GTA is seeing the changes from a technology and consumption perspective, but up here in Ottawa, we've seen quite an influx of remote workers, consumption of cloud services, and a change in the traditional paradigm of perimeter, drawbridge, and moat, where we're able to really control what's inside to a very high level of assurance. And with changes of perimeter come changes in design. And it's not that these challenges are insurmountable or difficult, but they do require a change in thinking and some of the tools and capabilities that organizations may have leveraged in the past will have to obviously mature and grow as we look at the larger expanding digital estate that's out there. Not only are we looking at corporate devices, but the influx of autonomous vehicles, IoT, bring your own devices, choose your own devices, other sensors, smart city infrastructure, supply chain automation, the list goes on and on and on. And with that becomes a vast amount of data and signal that you need to figure out a more lean and mean and effective way of mining, leveraging, and understanding that signal and intelligence. So when we talk to our CISOs about what are their concerns from a cybersecurity perspective, they really bucket into three. So the cybersecurity challenge all up, the transformation of that change as we think about the enterprise moving forward and consuming non-traditional service delivery or capabilities. And then finally, some of the regulatory compliance that comes in depending on the markets that you're working in or trying to serve. We're going to hone in specifically on the cybersecurity threat and challenge today, although the digital transformation and regulatory compliance are very important topics, but they really do warrant their own session in its entirety in order to cover it thoroughly. So when we think about the cybersecurity challenge, the best in breed challenges, managing devices as we think about the zero trust type of approach changes. We're moving away from, again, the traditional perimeter being the network and moving to a more zero trust model and then looking at gaining trust or elevating depending on how much I trust the person, the device, the information, and maybe where the individual is accessing the information from. These are all changes that are coming. When the device is no longer inside the traditional control center, how do we deliver patch management, security, reporting, and insights? And then finally, some of those data protection challenges, right? When it's inside the firewall, it's a lot easier to control information leakage as it goes in and out of a single choke point. You have to look at a more distributed methodology in order to support that in a cloud environment. So I thought it'd be best to look at how Microsoft MSIT looks at our SOC in tiers and tools and how this has matured as we in turn have adopted our own cloud services as part of certain programs inside the Azure team. We've worked on reducing our overall data center and lab footprint significantly, excess of 70 to 80% in order to consume cloud services, and thus obviously our traditional SOC approach had to shift as well. So first of all, the very low end, we see automation. These are through, very high assurance. We know that this is the attack. We've seen it before. You've seen it before. A good way of thinking about this is the signature definition, or the known patterns in which, if detected, mean this is happening. And there's a very high assurance that that is indeed what's occurring. As we move up and look into other remediation and tier support, next of all, we have the high-speed remediation, or Tier 1 SOC, right? Primary alert path. When we think about all the different alerts and tools, we're looking at about 65% of threat tools are surfaced here and remediated here. User reporting, about 10% comes here, and log and other event sources. Now, traditional Tier 1, if it's not operational, there's not a cookbook or prescriptive guidance for remediation that couldn't be done at an automation level, that's where we would elevate to a Tier 2 support, where we have advanced analysis and remediation. We can dig in, understand those special cases and how it might be different from the traditional patterns we've been seeing. Maybe this is a new case, a new threat, a new detection, a new pattern. And if that was the case, we finally move that up to that Tier 3, where we have our blue team and red team and proactive hunting and pen testing and other advanced forensic techniques that allow us to look at the previous tiers, understand new emerging patterns, capabilities, and then in turn have a feedback mechanism, as denoted by the blue line, where we bring those learnings forward and in turn try to bring more value to that first line of defense, which is the automation remediation, where ML and AI play an important and integral part to your cybersecurity posture. So if we look at security operations from a SOC perspective, traditional challenges, I've got legacy, wasted expertise, everybody doesn't know where to start, it's information overflow, maybe I don't have a properly defined service management, process management for investigation, skills, and why we're here today. There is just not enough folks in the ecosystem in order to support the growth potential we're seeing in the cybersecurity market, and I can't wait to hear Brian talk about that a little later. Finally, the rising in infrastructure and support costs. When we think about the traditional requirements and how that traditional paradigm forces forward, it's a very costly model to try to build these net new capabilities, operationalize them, and leverage them inside your organization. So you look at about how Microsoft is looking at addressing these. First of all, that aggregation of intelligence and signal, which is the intelligence security graph, and we're going to go into this in depth in a few slides, or in just a few moments. Looking at integrating existing SOC tools. Hey, IT's been around for a long time. There is a tradition. There is the traditional IoT, the traditional IT, the traditional MSIT, and all the expertise and knowledge that has been developed there. We understand that there might be custom capabilities, and furthermore, who knows your environment better than you do? So the ability to integrate with those existing capabilities are paramount in order to help for that transformation and adoption of net new capabilities that will really make your cyber operations hum and work smarter, better, and more efficiently. Integrated investigation across all of the ecosystem providers. When we think about an operating footprint, so Mac, Windows, Linux. I'm just testing out some ATP capabilities on a Mac device now. It's great to see that Microsoft has embraced the endpoint of choice in order to make sure that your enterprise and organization is untethered by a decision and has the support of the full capability and breadth of our cyber operations and tooling behind you, regardless of that client or endpoint choice. Additionally, Office 365, Azure, and other Microsoft technologies, that APT, or Advanced Persistent Threat capabilities around Azure ATP, Office ATP, MD ATP. We all like our acronyms at Microsoft. This information brings forward vast amounts of signal intelligence and detection, which tightly integrates into our SOC view and how you can operationalize that. Cloud native SIEM and SOAR for detection, advanced detection, and remediation. Leveraging the power of logic apps in order to take high-level process, well-defined process, again, that automation, we want high assurance, we understand what's happened, but on that high assurance of occurrence, we can then remediate that without requiring that human interaction. And knowing in some cases, as Adarsha mentioned, the black market capabilities are out there, that quick remediation without requiring human interaction and process management is integral in order to make sure that your individuals are focusing on the right signal intelligence and investigation, and not all the noise and signal fatigue that could be out there. Finally, assisting with incident response and recovery is also very important when we think about the overall security posture. So Microsoft has a capability called threat experts, a threat expert on demand, for lack of a better term. If you don't have the capability, or there's some additional insights that are warranted or support needed in order to bring that to resolution, you have the ability of leveraging our threat experts and pulling them into an active SOC investigation and bring that expertise and understanding to your problems and challenges. And then outside of that, obviously, the incident response, recovery, and hunting services that Microsoft has all up as part of different divisions inside our digital cybercrimes unit. With that, let's have a double tick on what is the intelligence security graph. And really, it's a signal aggregation, which then can be leveraged to provide insights, such as training for machine learning, AI, and other detection mechanisms. So just at a high level, a couple things to call out here. 1.2 billion devices scanned a month. If we think about the indexing, billions of pages that Bing is going out and indexing and providing that insights and intelligence, 450 billion authentications per month across the entire ecosystem that is Microsoft. Feeding into organizations such as the Digital Cybercrimes Unit, where they're actively and proactively working with government, law enforcement, and other organizations to take down botnets and other malicious components that are out there that are causing harm to you and me and the organizations that we service. So with that, if we double click into what is the intelligence security graph, the first part, we have the sample, the zoo, the dark markets, the threat feeds, honeypots, sinkholes, ways of baiting hackers and raising that attack cost, because inevitably the way of mitigating some of the low-cost dark market is to raise the cost so that it's less profitable and becomes a less opportune target for your organization to be attacked. Detonation sandboxes and other signal and intelligence are all feeding that underlying requirement that feeds into that data connection and analysis. And this is where ML and AI really lights up. And we'll get into a couple of examples where we're leveraging that signal intelligence and bringing that value back to our organization's customers and cybersecurity professionals. And then finally, how do we productize those individual capabilities in order to defend and protect capabilities such as Microsoft Threat Protection, which goes across Linux, Mac, and Windows, Cloud App Security, which is our CASB capability, in order to secure those SaaS capabilities, which are no longer behind your drawbridge and moat traditional infrastructure, or even Azure Identity Protection, knowing that we're shifting to that zero trust style approach and moving away from network being the perimeter. Identity and device obviously become paramount, making those informed decisions of whether somebody should get access to something or whether they're too much of a risk. So with that, two products that I wanted to touch lightly on, and then we'll double click on one of them, is Azure Security Center and Azure Sentinel. And these two capabilities actually exchange information, and we'll get into that in just a moment. As part of that intelligence security graph, any ATP capabilities inside the Microsoft ecosystem actually federate to the graph, exchange high value alerts so that other tooling are aware of that detection, so we get that immediate or near real-time transmission of alert data without having to re-query and reprocess that information to come up to the exact same idea. So think of the graph as not only the collectors, where I'm going to bring in all of my raw query log data, but then I have the express lane. As long as it's 4 a.m. in Toronto, it's the express lane. And I can whiz by and exchange high value alerts and information so that everybody else in the greater GTA is aware of a threat or an immediate challenge that might be coming forward. So if we double click into Sentinel, and look at how we're going to leverage AI and ML here at a high level. This is Microsoft's Cloud Native SIM for intelligence, security, analytics, cloud monitoring for your entire enterprise. I have the ability of bringing in data from Office 365 and ATP, as well as integrating those existing threats or existing systems and SOCs and SIEMs and other threat feeds or TI capabilities into a cloud native SIEM with SOAR capabilities in order to move forward with net new cyber tooling in your tool belt and maybe additional capacity and capabilities that you didn't have before inside your traditional IT environment. So we talked about data, and let's figure out, at a high level, let's talk about how that aggregates and why that's important from a Microsoft perspective and how we're leveraging that signal intelligence to train AI and ML. So with the detections that are coming of the products, capabilities such as Azure Active Directory, information coming through networking perimeter defenses in Azure itself, Office 365 mail or SharePoint information, along with other signal information from identity, Office 365 and Azure, where we see anomalous information. We can bring that together and leveraging ML and probabilistic kill chain analysis tools with AI. We're able to take that vast amount of signal. If you can see, we started with 50 billion network detections and 32 million identity. And we're able to aggregate that down to a possible 111 suspicious candidates. Through additional further machine learning analysis, we are able to deduce that to 25 actual cases which require, or incidences, which require mitigation through your SOC and those different tiers depending on how you've structured that governance and service management. But you can see very quickly how AI and ML is able to take a insurmountable amount of information and very quickly make it usable for your humans and other tooling or systems and capability to take informed decisions which require it without all that signal fatigue, which would happen without the AI and ML capabilities and aggregation. Another way of looking at how Fusion works, first of all, we construct a graph. Every entity is represented by a vertex. The edges are activities that it took. We apply a probabilistic kill chain analysis. There's no static here. Everything is understanding in near real time with all the signal and analysis of all the additional sources we talked about earlier. And then we can score that attack. And look at other mathematics such as clustering in order to assign identity and blast radius to really bring efficient and effective information quickly to your SOC and cyber analysts by leveraging the capability of ML and AI. An example of where this is applicable, we look at Fusion, a Fusion use case. We've detected some anonymous logins followed by suspicious Office 365 forwarding. Wow. So first of all, we saw some strange stuff happening with the identity and login, and then putting that together with some mail flow signal, we detected that, wow, there's email that's all of a sudden being forwarded to maybe somewhere you don't want it to, such as an external email address. So by able to take that signal analysis and bring that forward very quickly through Fusion ML. In this case, it's the Fusion ML that we've trained, actually named that. There's a link later on in the presentation that brings that value very quickly so you can action it. And maybe this might be a case for SOAR where I want to remediate that right away to stop the exfiltration of data, and then I will bring my hunting team in to understand how it happened. And this is how I can bring AI and ML and SOAR and automation capabilities in the Scale Cloud together in order to effectively make a decision, action the decision, and then move forward with best practices to remediate that based on that decision. If we think about the security operations journey from a machine learning investment as it relates to Sentinel, so the first pillar is that understanding the alert, no ML investment from an organization, so you're leveraging those built-in detections that are provided by us through our Fusion ML and other platform capabilities. As you move up, you start to understand detection and the data. You might have some limited ML capabilities and investment. Further, you move up the stack, we look at a more committed, maybe you're starting to use some notebooks in service with the free processing tier. I'm practicing my Pi, figuring out how to leverage different anomaly and clustering in order to bring additional value or additional insights based on my on-prem estate, which Microsoft may not have a full understanding of, but you do, and you can extend that to the Sentinel capability. And then finally, on the high end, we have the advanced ML investment. So you are bringing your own ML. We have a powerful ML platform. We have examples. We've developed ML models and best practices that you can leverage on GitHub, which are also later in the presentation in the resources slide, and really accelerate those ML processes and projects, right? With integration of existing tooling such as Spark and Jupyter Notebooks, which are heavily leveraged in organizations that have advanced AI and ML capabilities on-prem or in the cloud and have accelerated those footprints or investments with that transition to cloud. If we look at the built-in ML, we really want to look at democratizing and, as our feedback teams and loops from that tier 3 in our hunting are able to bring assurance detections, very high assurances to that automation platform, we want to bring that value to customers very quickly and see them realize the potential of moving to cloud and leveraging the cloud scale insight, signal, and aggregators such as Sentinel. Built-in ML models based on research and best practices. Again, a lot of our folks that are working on this are part of the Digital Cybercrimes Unit or other components under the DCU, which specifically deal with some of those threat actors that Darsha spoke about earlier at the beginning of the presentation. Really great stuff when we think about the built-in net new, just consuming out-of-box features and capabilities, so that easy button. We think about how that's applicable. So in this case, here's a SSH login that was detected, and you go through and understand the whole threat, where they happen, what account, and the entire kill chain view. Because of the AI and ML processing and bringing that signal and stitching it together without that human interaction or writing rule set required. Again, most of these detections are out of the box from a Microsoft Office 365 and Azure perspective. And we look at the far side of the spectrum with bring your own ML to the platform, accelerating the adoption, best practices available. We have a very lengthy GitHub repository that's maintained by the Sentinel product group. So please do have a look there, and we will share the links and additional resources. Integrating with those familiar tools, programming languages and development environment. Again, looking at Databricks, Kubernetes, Jupyter Notebooks, other processing capabilities that were already being matured on-prem. There is direct line and integration and easy porting and leveraging to or from the ecosystem in order to accelerate and bring quick value very quickly. And then providing scale, right? That's the big one. Azure, as we position it, is really a pay per use or pay per consumption I used to spec large data center purchases every 3 years. Have to hope that I benchmarked it and bought everything I needed, even though I may only need that for 2 or 3 months out of a year. I had to buy that because of a CapEx expenditure. Now we don't have to consider some of those upfront costs and only pay for what we're using, and that's obviously one of the benefits of cloud scale. Finally, if we think about some of the other bring your own ML use cases that are available, or what we're seeing, train your ML to get customized model, modifying ML algorithms, create your own model, integrate to a Databricks environment, importing your own ML and sharing models are all use cases that we are fleshing out or have fleshed out. And then finally, a great representation, or the back end, I wanted to show you very quickly on how we're using ML and AI. Once an incident has been processed and assigned, and we're using the blue team in this case to do the investigation, to understand the blast radius, what happened, what was touched, where do I need to consider additional investigations to make sure that it has been effectively cleaned and I don't have any remnants that may cause me issues. Great visualization when we look at the investigation, automated experience, quickly hover over, see additional signal intelligence based on that entity, and really visualize that whole kill chain as part of the investigation and remediation process as we move forward. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the group, and I thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to any Q&A questions that might come up.
Excellent, Derek. You're absolutely on time. It's 24 minutes, 58, 59, and 25 minutes. So perfectly on time. Next 5 minutes for Q&A. There were a lot of interesting questions which come up. I'm going to read a couple of these one by one. So the first question came from Sin, and he was basically talking about, wait, where did that question go? Okay, how to prevent ransomware attack. You're on mute, Derek.
Oh, that's great. I'm on a preview version, so my speaker mute button doesn't line up to the Teams client. I apologize for that. Ransomware, there are some built-in detections. It really depends where we're looking as part of the overall enterprise portfolio or estate. There is built-in detections for ransomware in our Office 365 portfolio. There are detections, for instance, around OneDrive and the ability to remediate ransomware or roll back that threat once detected. If we detect ransomware in an ATP document library, instantly there is a notification and process, and even the ability to roll back some content from a remediation perspective of ransomware. So from an endpoint perspective, from productivity, that's a great way of doing it. Additionally, MDATP would be the additional EDR methodology that we would kick in there in order to remediate that ransomware on an endpoint server, Linux or Mac device.
Excellent. What are the best popular pen testing tools in the market?
Oh, there's so many, and it really depends on the framework and what I'm trying to test against, right? I would say that there is not one that rules them all out there from an ecosystem perspective, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses. I actually pulled out a framework which I hadn't used in 4.5 years about 3 weeks ago, just because of a specific version of a system that the client was using that we hadn't seen in a while. So it depends. I hate to give you such a consulting answer that's out there from a pen testing perspective. What I use for IoT or some of the stuff I do on 5G and LTE is very different when I'm looking at penetration testing for a radio or control node than how I'm going to look at pen testing a server or a desktop device.
Excellent. Next question was from Vishal. Azure Sentinel shows as multi-cloud support. How to achieve this?
Fantastic. So if you go into Azure Sentinel and have a look at the data connector tab, We can deploy a solution which you can actually consume CloudTrail data and bring that AWS instance over and have that single cloud monitoring analytic platform for third-party clouds, or more importantly, that existing private cloud, which all clients have, called the traditional data center, and bringing that on board and connecting up. There's processes through the OMS log analytics agent where I can bring on-prem server data, bring that up into the log analytics workspace, and then leverage Sentinel's insight and Custo query to pivot and gain additional capabilities and detections off of that data.
Got it. Can you also share some information on cybersecurity protection insurance?
That one I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm your technical friend. I don't know much about how you pay for anything, and I apologize for that.
No problem. So there was an excellent question asked by Vishal, and I think that question was for all three speakers. So we'll wait for the end where we are doing an open discussion for all the three experts. But that question was about what does the future of all of this mean? I think we'll get to that at the end. The next question I can see is zero trust is more of identification. It was more like a comment, I think. Then there was a question from Ajit. Is Azure Sentinel included as a part of an Azure subscription?
Yes, so Azure Sentinel Core is built on top of, so you have log analytics as your data collection mechanism and aggregate. And Sentinel then consumes that data as well as other processes like incident analytics and workbooks. It pulls down from the same pay-as-you-go or Azure monetary commit process that you would have for other Azure resources.
Great. I'm going to go through one last question and then we'll get back to all of these. This question from Vishal again. All AI and ML are great in the cloud. How I extend these tools to monitor on-prem where my 60 to 70% solution is sitting? Some best practice and consideration you need to consider while design. How can I use these tools for on-prem also? One pane for glass and both on-prem and public cloud.
Okay, so that's a fairly lengthy response that I'll have to give, and maybe what I'll do is I'll type up a couple of pieces and give some additional reference information into my slide deck. But cool. We do have a fairly secure and mature on-prem aggregate story and threat detection that feeds up to Sentinel. As I mentioned, the middle GUI of the graph, that superhighway where we can federate a signal alert. So if Defender on server or an endpoint detects something on-prem, it has the ability to communicate to the graph through that superhighway and say, I have a problem, this is the problem. And right away, as soon as it does that, Sentinel is aware of that communication. So that fabric that's being established for our tooling also extends to multiple cloud or cloud to on-prem, and that's how those communication pathways would flow.
Excellent. Okay, we have 1 minute more on time, so we'll move to the next speaker. Thank you so much, Derek. Derek, there are a couple of questions in the chat, so if you can see some questions which are unanswered, if you can respond in the chat, it'll be great.
Will do.
Dhruv, over to you.